They say desperation makes you see things that aren't there. I'd been walking 3 days through October woods with my son asleep on my back when I smelled wood smoke threading through the pines. Real smoke. Not a hallucination born from empty pockets and a stomach that had forgotten what full felt like. The scent pulled me off the trail, through brambles that caught my jacket, until I saw it. A timber cabin, windows dark except for the orange flicker inside. The door hung slightly open. Frost sparkled on the porch boards. But through that gap I could see flames dancing in a stone fireplace. Not embers, actual flames, as if someone had just laid fresh logs and walked out for water. No car, no tracks except deer prints, no sound but wind in the eaves and the soft crackle of burning wood. I should have kept walking. Should have figured it was occupied, that the owner had just stepped away. But my boy stirred against my neck and I felt how cold his hands were and I thought, just long enough to warm him. Just until dawn. Then we'd leave a thank you note and disappear back into whatever came next. I pushed the door wider. The hinges sang a long, plaintive note. Inside, the cabin exhaled decades of pine resin and old wool. Dust motes swirled in the firelight. A kettle sat on a hook above the flames, still steaming faintly. On a rough-hewn table, a tin cup held what looked like tea, gone cold but recent enough that condensation beaded the metal. And beside the cup, a leather journal, open to a page dated 2 weeks ago. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. The first line stopped me cold. If you're reading this, then I've already gone. Don't feel guilty. You're supposed to be here. Chapter 1. The Invitation. I lowered my son onto a cot by the wall, actual bedding, wool blankets that smelled of cedar, and returned to the journal. My hands shook, and not just from cold. The page continued. I've left the fire burning because I knew someone would need it. The woodshed is stocked. The well pump still works if you prime it twice. The deed is in the top drawer of the desk, along with a pencil and forms. I couldn't finish what I started here, but maybe you can. I read it 3 times. Then I looked around the cabin properly. It was one large room with a sleeping loft reached by a ladder, a cast-iron stove, open shelves holding mismatched dishes, and a desk buried under papers. Tools hung on pegs, saws, hammers, a coil of rope. The floorboards were uneven but solid. Through a rear window, I glimpsed an outhouse, and what might have been a garden plot, overgrown but fenced. It felt like a place holding its breath. I opened the desk drawer. Inside, a property deed, handwritten and notarized for this cabin and 20 surrounding acres. The owner's name was printed in block letters, Samuel Weaver, with a date from 1987. Beneath it, a stack of county tax receipts, all paid through last year. An envelope labeled, "For whoever stays," containing a notarized letter transferring use rights to any person in genuine need who restores and maintains this property. My throat tightened. This wasn't theft. It was an offer. But offers like this didn't exist in the world I knew, where every inch of ground belonged to someone with a lawyer and a lien. I checked the boy. He slept deeply, color returning to his cheeks. Outside, the woods had gone fully dark, and the temperature was plummeting. We had no tent, no money, no plan B. Just a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, a water bottle, and a pocket knife. I sat at the desk and read the next entry in the journal. November 3rd, 2024. The roof is leaking in the northwest corner. I've patched it twice, but the wood's rotting underneath. I'm 81 years old and I can't climb a ladder anymore without my vision swimming. I think about leaving this place to rot, but that feels like betrayal. My granddaughter says I should sell, move into town. She doesn't understand that some things aren't measured in dollars. I turned pages. The handwriting grew shakier, but the entries continued. Notes on the well's iron content, a recipe for dandelion tea, a sketch of where to plant potatoes for best son. The last dated entry was October 9th, 2025. My heart is giving out. I can feel it. The doctor said 6 months, but I think it's less. I'm going to my daughter's place in Billings tomorrow. I won't be back, but I'm leaving the fire set, wood stacked, and this journal for whoever finds it. Don't let this place die. I closed the journal carefully. Through the window, snow had begun to fall, light, tentative flakes that melted on contact. My son's breathing was steady and deep. In the morning, I'd need to assess the cabin properly, check the roof, the foundation, the state of the well, figure out if the legal document meant anything or if some distant heir would show up with a sheriff. But tonight, I let myself believe that desperation hadn't made me see things that weren't there. Tonight the fire burned, the walls held, and we had a place to sleep. If you're enjoying this journey so far, Tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Chapter 2. Assessment. Dawn came blue and clean. I woke to my son, Lucas, 8 years old, sitting at the table staring at the journal. He'd learned early not to touch things that weren't his, but curiosity had won. Dad, who lived here? A man named Samuel. I poured water from a clay pitcher into the kettle, lit the stove with a match from a tin on the mantel. He left this place for someone who needed it. Us? Maybe. I didn't want to promise anything. Promises had a way of breaking lately. We ate oatmeal I found in a sealed jar, still good, barely past expiration, and then I began the real work, taking inventory. The cabin measured maybe 20 feet by 30, with the loft adding another sleeping area. The fireplace drew well, the chimney clear. But when I climbed outside to inspect the roof, I saw what Samuel had meant. The northwest corner sagged, shingles curling, and beneath them, the wood felt spongy under my hand. The well was hand-dug, lined with stones, a manual pump mounted on a wooden platform. I primed it like the journal said, twice, firm strokes, and rusty water coughed out, then cleared, cold, clean, with a mineral bite. The woodshed held 2 cords of split logs, neatly stacked. The outhouse was basic but functional. The garden plot had gone to weeds, but I recognized the skeleton of tomato cages, a trellis for beans, raised beds framed with stones. This place had been loved, meticulously maintained until the maintainer's body failed him. Lucas followed me around asking questions I didn't always have answers for. When we returned inside, I found him holding a photograph tucked between journal pages. A young man in overalls standing beside a much older version of himself, both smiling, the cabin visible in the background. Samuel and someone who looked like a grandson. The back read, Jake, 2010. Think they'll come back? Lucas asked. I don't know. I was honest with him about most things. But the journal says we're supposed to be here, so we'll stay until someone tells us different. I spent the afternoon reading more of the journal, looking for practical information. Samuel had been a veteran, Army Corps of Engineers, who'd bought this land with military pension savings in 1987. He'd built the cabin himself, slowly, using salvaged timber and hand tools. His wife had died in 1995. His daughter visited once a year. Out of duty more than love, he'd written. His grandson Jake had been the exception, had spent summers here learning carpentry until college pulled him toward Denver and a tech job. The entries weren't chronological. They jumped years, capturing moments. A hard winter, a bear that destroyed the shed, the summer he'd planted an apple tree that finally bore fruit. And then I found it. The entry that explained the fire. June 12, 2024. I'm setting up a system. If something happens to me suddenly, I want this place to speak for itself. I've paid property taxes 5 years ahead. I've written the transfer document. My lawyer said it would hold up if challenged, as long as the new occupant maintains the land and pays future taxes. I'm leaving instructions, tools, and enough supplies to get started. Whoever finds this will need help. I was once the person who needed help, and someone gave it. This is how I pay it forward. The fire wasn't an accident. It was an invitation, deliberately left burning. That night, lying in the darkness with Lucas asleep beside me, I heard the cabin settle, the groan of old wood adjusting to weight, the tick of cooling metal in the stove. It didn't feel haunted. It felt occupied, not by ghosts, but by the accumulated effort of a man who'd spent 40 years making something from nothing. I decided then, I'd stay, at least long enough to fix the roof. Chapter 3. First repairs. The county clerk's office was 12 miles away, down a rutted Forest Service road that opened onto State Highway. I walked it on a Tuesday, leaving Lucas with instructions to stay inside and keep the fire fed. It took 4 hours round trip. The clerk, a woman named Margaret with reading glasses on a beaded chain, examined the deed and transfer document with the careful attention of someone who'd seen every kind of land dispute. Samuel Weaver, she said finally. I remember him. Paid his taxes in person, always early. This document looks legitimate, but you'll need to register it formally. There's a fee. How much? $175. I had $43 in my wallet, every cent we had. What happens if I don't register? Legally, you're squatting. If Samuel's heirs contest, you'd have no standing. She looked at me over her glasses. But if they were going to contest, they'd have done it by now. His daughter knew about the transfer. She signed as witness. You file when you can. Meanwhile, keep the place maintained. That's what Samuel wanted. I thanked her and left, mind spinning. $175 might as well have been $1,000. But I had time. The taxes were paid. The cabin existed in a kind of legal limbo, neither mine nor abandoned. I stopped at a construction site on the way back, asked the foreman if they had scrap materials they were dumping. He let me take a bundle of shingles, irregular cuts but functional, and a half-used tube of roofing cement. "Fixing up the old Weaver place?" he asked. Word traveled fast in small places. "Trying to." "Good. Samuel was a good man. Deserves better than rot." At the cabin, I found Lucas had swept the floor and reorganized the shelves. "I found more stuff," he said, pointing to a box under the cot. Inside, hand tools, a level, a tin of nails, work gloves that almost fit. We spent the next 3 days on the roof. I taught Lucas how to pry up damaged shingles without breaking the good ones, how to slide new ones underneath and seal the edges. We worked in cold sunlight, the forest spreading below us in shades of rust and gold. My hands blistered, then hardened. Lucas asked why we were fixing a place that wasn't ours. "It is ours," I said, "for as long as we take care of it." By Friday, the northwest corner was patched. Not pretty, but watertight. That night it rained. A hard, cold autumn rain, and we lay in the loft listening to water drum the roof. No leaks, no drips, just the sound of a home holding weather outside where it belonged. Lucas fell asleep smiling. I stayed awake thinking about Samuel, about the kind of person who'd build something for decades knowing he'd leave it behind, trusting that someone else would value what he'd made. It felt like a test, not of skill but of worthiness. I thought about my own failures, the job I'd lost, the apartment we'd been evicted from, the string of bad decisions that had led us into the woods with nothing. I thought about whether I deserved this second chance. Then I remembered something Samuel had written. Deserving has nothing to do with it. Need is enough. The rain continued, the roof held, and somewhere in that sound, I found permission to stay. If you're enjoying this journey so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Chapter 4. The Hidden Room. November arrived cold. We developed routines. Wake with dawn, stoke the fire, heat water for washing. Lucas did schoolwork from a donated tablet a librarian had given us months ago before everything fell apart. I worked on the cabin, caulking windows, reinforcing the porch, clearing the chimney of 3 decades of creosote buildup. The journal became my manual. Samuel had documented everything, which boards in the floor were loose and why. He'd built a root cellar underneath, where the property line ran, marked by stones with red paint, how to coax the hand pump when it froze. But there were gaps, references to the back room that didn't match the cabin's layout, mentions of the real work without explanation. I found the answer by accident. I was replacing rotten boards in the loft when my crowbar punched through into a void. Not the main room below, something else. I pulled up 3 more boards and shined my flashlight down. A narrow space, maybe 5 feet by 8, tucked between the loft floor and the main room ceiling. A hiding place, or a forgotten add-on. Inside, 3 wooden crates, a metal lockbox, and something covered in canvas. I lowered myself down carefully, the space tight enough that I had to crouch. The air smelled of old paper and machine oil. The lockbox wasn't locked. The key hung on a nail nearby, labeled in Samuel's handwriting. Inside, documents, deeds, surveys, letters. The first letter was dated 1987, addressed to Samuel from a lawyer. "Mr. Weaver, regarding your inquiry into the 30-acre tract adjacent to your property, the land is currently held by the county due to unpaid taxes from the previous owner, deceased 1981. It will go to auction in April, unless claimed by heirs. I've researched, no living heirs exist. You may acquire it for back taxes plus administrative fees. Total estimated cost, $2,400. I flipped through more documents. Samuel had bought it, had expanded his 20 acres to 50. But the paperwork had never been properly consolidated. The original 20-acre deed was registered, but the additional 30 existed only in county records, never transferred to his name on the master deed, which meant legally, 30 acres of this land was still unclaimed. Still sitting in the same limbo Samuel had found it in 40 years ago. The second crate held tools, a surveyor's transit, stakes, ribbon, a hand-drawn map marking the full 50-acre boundary. Samuel had known exactly what he owned, even if the county didn't. The third crate stopped me cold. Inside, seed packets, hundreds of them, vacuum-sealed and labeled. Heirloom varieties, tomatoes, beans, corn, squash. Underneath, a letter addressed, "To whoever stays." These seeds came from my grandfather's farm in Nebraska. I've saved them for 40 years. They'll grow here if you plant them right. The journal has instructions. This land can feed you. It fed me. It'll feed whoever comes next. That's the real inheritance, not money, not property. The ability to sustain yourself when the world says you can't. Lucas called down from above. Dad, you okay? Yeah. My voice caught. I'm okay. I climbed back up holding the letter. That night I read it to Lucas by firelight. He asked if we could plant the seeds in spring. I told him yes if we were still here, if the county didn't evict us, if Samuel's daughter didn't change her mind. But I was starting to believe, not in magic or miracles, in the simpler truth that some people build things meant to outlast them, and sometimes you're lucky enough to be the person who finds it before it's too late. Outside, the first hard frost settled over the woods. Inside, we had heat, light, seeds for spring, and a map to land that might be ours if we could figure out how to claim it. The journal's next entry answered that question before I could ask it. Chapter 5. The Plan. Samuel's journal entry from March 1988 laid it out. Consolidating the deeds proved harder than buying the land. The county clerk says I need a surveyor's report, a title search, and a lawyer to file the paperwork. Cost, $2,500 I don't have, so I'm documenting it myself. I've marked every corner, photographed every stake, drawn the maps. Someday maybe someone will finish what I couldn't. He'd left us the blueprint, everything we needed except money and time. I started small. Each morning after chores, I hiked the property boundaries with Samuel's map, checking his markers. Most were still there. Stone cairns with red paint, iron stakes driven deep, ribbons tied to specific trees. Where markers had fallen, I rebuilt them. Where ribbons had rotted, I replaced them with surveyor's tape from the box. Lucas came with me. I taught him how to read the map, how to use the compass, how to count paces and mark waypoints. It gave him purpose, gave us both something larger than survival. But by mid-November, money became critical. The $175 for deed registration, the eventual cost of proper surveying and legal filing, food we couldn't grow or hunt, clothes for Lucas. He was outgrowing everything. I took a job in town. The construction foreman who'd given me shingles needed a laborer for a garage build. $10 an hour, cash, no questions asked. I worked Tuesday through Thursday, dawn until dark, hiking the 12 miles each way because we had no car. Lucas stayed at the cabin. I left him the journal, the tools, instructions for emergencies. It terrified me, but the alternative was losing everything. He proved capable. On my first return, I found he'd split a week's worth of firewood, trapped a rabbit in a snare I'd shown him how to set, and discovered another cache of supplies. Canned goods hidden in the root cellar, still edible, enough to get us through winter. Samuel left notes everywhere, Lucas said, showing me papers he'd found tucked inside books on the shelf, like he knew someone would need them. The notes were practical. How to render fat for cooking, how to patch clothes with needle and thread, how to make soup from bones and wild onions. But they were also personal. Advice, encouragement. Don't give up on hard days. Hard days end. The land doesn't. In December, I had enough saved for the deed registration. Margaret filed it with what looked like approval. You're doing right by the place, she said. Samuel would have liked that. But that same week, a truck pulled up the Forest Service road. A new Silverado, expensive and out of place. A man in his 40s climbed out, looked at the cabin with the expression of someone appraising merchandise. Help you? I called from the porch. I'm Dan Hutchins. I buy distressed properties, fix them up, flip them. Heard someone was squatting on the old Weaver land. Wanted to make an offer before you get too attached. My stomach dropped. I'm not squatting. I have legal claim. You have a paper that says Weaver wanted you here. That's not the same as ownership. His daughter could sell this place tomorrow. I've already talked to her. She's thinking about it. He handed me a business card. When she decides to sell, I'm offering 20 grand cash for the cabin and 20 acres. That's generous for a shack with no utilities. It's 50 acres, I said before I could stop myself. His eyebrows lifted. County records say 20. County records are incomplete. Then I'll offer 30 grand for the full 50. You'll never match that, think about it. He returned to his truck, paused. You've done some nice work on the roof. Real shame if it went to waste because you couldn't afford to stay. He drove off, leaving mud tracks and a cold knot in my chest. That night I reread Samuel's journal, looking for answers. Found them on a page dated July 2024. My daughter Patricia called. Wants me to sell, use the money for care. I told her no. She doesn't understand legacy. She thinks everything's about cash value. I told her the land goes to whoever needs it most. She said that's not how the world works. Maybe she's right, but I'm not building a world. I'm building a way out for one person at a time. That's enough. The entry ended with a line underlined 3 times. Don't let them convince you it's theirs to take. You're here because I wanted you here. That counts. I wanted to believe him. But wanting and having legal standing were different things. Hutchins had resources, lawyers, money. If Patricia Weaver decided to sell, there was nothing I could do, unless I proved the 50 acres existed, unless I made the unclaimed land legally mine before anyone else realized it was available. I had 3 months before property auctions resumed in spring. 3 months to survey 50 acres, file the paperwork, and pay fees I didn't have. The journal's final entry gave me hope. The county has forgotten about this land. That's a gift. Move quietly. Work carefully. By the time they notice, you'll already be planted. Outside, snow began to fall in earnest. Lucas watched from the window, his breath fogging the glass. I stood beside him, looking at the woods that might or might not be ours, and made a decision. We'd stay. We'd fight. And we'd trust that a man we'd never met had built something strong enough to protect us even after he was gone. If this restoration story has you hooked, hit like, it helps us bring more lost places back to life. Chapter 6. The storm January brought the kind of cold that made wood snap in the night. We burned through a cord of firewood, then started on the second. I worked construction when I could, but ice shut down most projects. Money slowed to a trickle. Lucas grew quieter. Not sullen. He was too practical for that, but watchful. He'd started reading Samuel's journal on his own, copying passages into a notebook. One morning I found him sketching the cabin, trying to capture the way light hit the stone chimney. "You doing okay?" I asked. "I don't want to leave." "We're not leaving." Hutchins said. "Hutchins doesn't decide." I crouched beside him. "Samuel left us more than a cabin. He left us the knowledge to keep it. That's harder to take away." But I wasn't sure I believed it. In late January, I contacted a surveyor. The quote came back at $800. I had 300 saved. The gap felt insurmountable. Then the storm hit. It started as freezing rain, the kind that coats everything in glass and turned to snow. 18 inches in 24 hours. Wind that made the cabin shudder. I kept the fire roaring, but cold crept through gaps in the chinking, through the floorboards, through the windows, despite the plastic sheeting I'd stapled over them. On the second night, something in the loft gave way. Not the roof, my repair had held, but a support beam, rotted from the inside, stressed by the weight of snow. It cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The loft floor sagged at one end. Lucas and I scrambled down the ladder. I shined a flashlight up. The beam hadn't broken completely, but it wouldn't hold much more weight. If the loft collapsed, it would take out half the main room. We'd have no insulation from the roof, no second sleeping space. In winter, that could mean death. I had no replacement beam. No way to shore up the existing one properly without materials I couldn't afford. Lucas looked at me with the kind of trust that hurt. What do we do? I thought about running, about abandoning the cabin, hiking to town, finding a shelter that would take us until spring. It would be sensible, safe, but I couldn't. Not after everything Samuel had invested, not after everything we'd already put in. I climbed into the loft carefully, testing each step. The beam had split lengthwise, the rot hidden until stress exposed it. But examining it closer, I saw something Samuel had done decades ago. He'd sistered a secondary support beam alongside the main one, connected with iron brackets. The main beam had failed. The sister beam was still solid. If I could remove weight from the main beam and transfer it to the sister, we'd buy time, maybe enough time to get money for a proper fix. I spent the rest of the night emptying the loft, bedding, tools, everything we'd stored up there. Then, using a jack I found in the woodshed and timber from the root cellar, I braced the failing beam from below, taking pressure off the crack. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't permanent, but it would hold. By dawn, the storm had passed. Sun broke through clouds, turning snow into fields of blinding white. Lucas helped me haul insulation back to the loft, careful to distribute weight along the walls rather than the center. We'd survived, but barely. That afternoon, I hiked to the construction site. The foreman looked at me. I must have appeared half frozen, and shook his head. "You need to quit that place, man. It's a money pit." "Can't." "Why not?" I didn't have words that wouldn't sound foolish, so I just said, "Someone needs to finish what got started." He studied me. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. "Hey, Jerry, you still got that load of lumber from the Morrison demo?" "Yeah, the good stuff. I got a guy who could use it." "No, he can't pay. Call it a donation. Tax write-off or whatever." He hung up, scribbled an address. "Pick it up Saturday." That should get you a replacement beam and some extra. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by not dying out there. He handed me $50 cash. Early pay for next week. I made it back to the cabin as the sun set. Lucas had soup ready. Canned tomatoes, beans, wild onions, the last of the rabbit. We ate silently, exhausted, aware how close we'd come to losing everything. That night I found a new entry in Samuel's journal, one I'd missed before. The page had been stuck to its neighbor, revealing itself only now. March 1993, the worst storm in 40 years. The cabin held, but I learned something. Places like this don't survive on their own. They survive because someone decides they're worth the fight. Every nail, every patch, every cold night stayed. That's a choice. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what someone chooses to keep. I closed the journal, understanding finally what Samuel had been building. Not just a cabin, a test. A question asked of whoever came after, "Are you willing to stay when staying is hard?" My answer was yes, whatever it took. If this restoration story has you hooked, hit like. It helps us bring more lost places back to life. Chapter 7. The Reveal. February brought an unexpected visitor. Patricia Weaver arrived in a rental sedan, picking her way through snow in city boots. She was in her mid-50s, dressed like someone who'd left rural life behind and didn't regret it. "You must be the squatter," she said. Not unkind, just matter of fact. "I'm the person your father wanted here." I kept my voice neutral. "May I see the document?" I showed her the transfer letter. She read it carefully, lips pressed thin. This was Dad's handwriting. And yes, I witnessed it. He was lucid, not coerced. She handed it back. "But that doesn't make this simple. Your father paid taxes 5 years ahead. The cabin's maintained. I'm following his wishes. And if I sell anyway, then you're undoing what he spent 40 years building." She looked at the cabin, the fixed roof, the smoke rising from the chimney, the woodshed I'd restocked. Lucas appeared in the doorway, watching silently. Patricia's expression softened. "How old is he?" "8. My son's 8. She was quiet for a moment. "Dad never told me he'd done this. The transfer, I mean. He told me he was making arrangements, but I thought he meant hospice paperwork, not giving away the land. He didn't give it away. He offered it to someone who needed it. And do you need it?" The honest answer felt too vulnerable, but I gave it anyway. We were homeless, living in shelters, sometimes cars, sometimes woods. Your father left a fire burning and instructions for how to survive. So yes, we needed it. She sat on the porch steps. Despite the cold, "I haven't been here in 15 years. It was always Dad's place, never mine. He loved it. I never understood why. No electricity, no running water, miles from anything. But looking at it now, seeing what you've done." She trailed off. "Dan Hutchins made you an offer," I said. "He did. 30,000. I could use that money. But Dad specifically said not to sell to developers. He wanted the land kept intact." She looked at me. "You know there's more land than the deed shows?" "I found the documents. Your father bought 30 additional acres, but the deeds were never consolidated. It's still technically county property. Can you claim it?" "If I can afford surveying and legal fees." "Which I can't." She stood, brushing snow from her jeans. "I'm not selling to Hutchins, but I can't just walk away without knowing this place is secure. Give me 2 months. I'll look into the legal side, see if there's a way to help you claim the full 50 acres without breaking my budget. In the meantime, stay. Fix what needs fixing. If Dad trusted you, that's enough for me." She left her phone number and drove off. Lucas watched her go, then turned to me. "Is she going to take it back?" "I don't think so. But we can't depend on her. We have to assume we're on our own." The lumber donation arrived 3 days later, enough to replace the loft beam properly. I spent a week on the repair, Lucas handing me tools, learning terms like joist hanger and load bearing. The new beam was solid, milled oak salvaged from a century-old barn. It would outlast the cabin. With the loft secure, I returned to the hidden room. There were still crates I hadn't fully explored. The one under the canvas held something unexpected: surveying equipment. Not just the transit I'd found before, but a newer GPS unit, still in its box, with a note. "Jake sent this. Said technology would make the survey faster. I'm too old to learn new tricks, but maybe you're not. Instructions included. The coordinates are already in the system. I marked every corner 3 years ago, just never filed the maps. SW. Samuel had done the survey, had documented everything. All I needed was to generate the official report and file it with the county. I powered up the GPS unit. The battery was dead, but I had a solar charger from my backpacking days. 3 hours of sun, and the unit came alive. The data was all there: waypoints, measurements, property lines. Samuel had even included notes about each corner marker. That night, I read the final pages of the journal, entries I'd been saving, afraid they might be an ending rather than instructions. May 2025, Jake visited. I told him about the transfer plan. He said it was crazy, that someone might take advantage. I told him the world's full of takers. Might as well bet on givers once in a while. He asked what I wanted my legacy to be. I said I wanted to prove you could build something that outlasts you if you build it for the right reasons. Not profit, not pride. For the simple fact that people need places to belong. And sometimes you're the person who can give them that. The entry continued on the next page, dated June. I'm leaving tomorrow. This is probably the last time I'll write here. To whoever reads this, you've already proved you're worth it. You stayed. You worked. You didn't run when it got hard. That's all I needed to know. The rest of the instructions are in the lockbox. Contact information for a sympathetic lawyer in Helena, notes on filing the consolidated deed, tips for dealing with the county clerk. You'll need to pay some fees, but nothing you can't manage if you're resourceful. And you are. You wouldn't have made it this far if you weren't. Finish what I started. Make it yours. And when you're old and tired like me, pass it forward. That's how we beat the people who think everything's for sale. The final line was underlined. The land will teach you what you need to know. Listen to it. I closed the journal, hands shaking. Lucas was asleep in the loft, the new beam solid above him. Outside, the forest was dark and still, but not silent. I could hear the wind in the pines, the creak of branches, the distant call of an owl, the land teaching me. I thought about the months we'd been here, learning to read weather, to fix what broke, to survive on next to nothing, to trust that effort accumulates, that small repairs add up to something lasting. Samuel hadn't just left us a cabin, he'd left us a curriculum, and the final exam was proving we could turn 50 acres of forgotten land into something legally ours, permanently protected, passed forward when our time came. I had the tools, I had the data, I just needed time and persistence. 2 days later, Patricia called. She'd found a lawyer willing to file the consolidated deed pro bono, part of a rural land trust initiative. The catch: I'd need to complete the survey report, prove continuous maintenance, and commit to keeping the land undeveloped. Can you do that? She asked. Yes. Then let's make it official. My father wanted this place to live. So do I. Chapter 8. Community word spread faster than I expected. By March, people started showing up. The construction foreman brought a crew to help stabilize the foundation. A retired teacher named Helen dropped off boxes of books for Lucas. The librarian, a woman named Carrie, organized a donation drive. Clothes, tools, canned goods, even a small generator. Small towns notice, she said, stacking supplies on the porch. You've been here 4 months, keeping to yourself, fixing up a place people thought was dead. That means something. I didn't know how to respond to generosity. I'd spent so long expecting doors to close that open hands felt suspicious. But Lucas thrived on it. He started going to town with me, helping carry supplies, talking to people about what we were building. Helen started homeschooling him 2 days a week, refusing payment. Samuel used to help my husband fix our roof every spring. This is how I pay that back. The lawyer Patricia found, a man named Tom Rivera, met with me in early March. He reviewed Samuel's documentation, my survey data, and the maintenance records I'd been keeping. This is solid, he said. The county abandoned the unclaimed acreage decades ago. If you file now, before they realize it's valuable again, you'll likely get it for back taxes and administrative fees. Maybe $2,000 total. I don't have $2,000. You have 3 months to raise it. The auction won't happen until June. He handed me a folder. Here's the filing paperwork. I've done the legal side pro bono, but you'll need to cover the county fees. Start a fundraiser if you have to. Tell your story. People respond to effort. I didn't want to ask for charity, but Lucas pointed out what should have been obvious. Samuel asked for help. That's why he left the journal. Asking isn't weakness. So I did. Carrie helped me set up a small crowdfunding campaign. Not online, just a jar at the general store with an explanation. Help us claim Samuel Weaver's land. I wrote the story in 3 paragraphs. Who we were, what we were trying to do, why it mattered. Donations came in. $5, $20, $100 from an anonymous donor. By April, we had 1,200. Close, but not enough. Then Dan Hutchins showed up again. "Heard you're trying to buy the county land," he said, leaning against his truck. "That's ambitious, also pointless. I've already filed an intent to bid. I'll outbid you at auction, buy the whole 50 acres and develop it properly. Cabins for rent, hunting lodge, tourist draw." Samuel didn't want that. Samuel's dead, and you don't have the capital to compete. He pulled out a checkbook. "But I'm reasonable. I'll give you 5,000 cash to walk away now. Keep the cabin, the original 20 acres, and the money. Let me have the rest. Everyone wins." "No, you're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." He left angry. But I'd meant it. Some things weren't for sale, no matter how practical selling would be. That night I told Lucas what happened. He didn't seem surprised. "Samuel's journal says people will always try to take what you build, but you only lose if you let them." Smart kid. In May, the community fundraiser hit $2,000. Tom filed the paperwork. The auction was scheduled for June 15th. If no one else bid, the land was mine for back taxes, $1,800. But Hutchins would bid. And he had resources I didn't. The week before the auction, something unexpected happened. Patricia called. "I talked to Jake, Samuel's grandson. He's been following what you're doing. He wants to help." She paused. "He's wiring you $5,000, enough to outbid Hutchins if necessary. He says his grandfather would have wanted that. I can't accept." "You can, and you will. Jake's a software engineer. 5,000 is a weekend for him. But this place, it's his childhood. He's not letting it become a tourist trap." The money arrived 2 days later. On June 15th, I stood in the county clerk's office with Tom, Patricia, and a room full of strangers. Hutchins sat in the back, arms crossed. The auctioneer called the parcel, the 30 acres adjacent to Samuel Weaver's registered property. Starting bid, $1,800. I raised my hand. Hutchins raised his. $2,000. $2,500, I said. $3,000. $4,000. He stood. $5,000. $6,000, I said, my voice steady. The room went silent. Hutchins stared at me. He hadn't expected me to have that kind of backing. He could go higher. He had more. But the point was made. I wasn't walking away. $7,000, he said, testing. $8,000. He laughed bitterly. "You're going to overpay for land you can't develop. Fine. It's yours." He walked out. The auctioneer looked at me. "Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman for $8,000. I paid in cash, money Patricia and Jake had wired. Tom handled the paperwork. By 3 p.m. I owned 50 acres of Montana forest, a cabin built by a man I'd never met, and a legacy I was only beginning to understand. Outside, Lucas waited on the courthouse steps. I sat beside him. "We won? We won." He leaned against me, quiet. Then, "What do we do now?" I thought about Samuel's journal, about the seeds waiting to be planted, about the responsibility of owning something you didn't build but are trusted to continue. We finish what he started, and then we figure out what comes after. Chapter 9. Belonging. Summer came soft. We planted Samuel's seeds, heirloom tomatoes, beans, squash, in the garden plot I'd cleared and fenced. Lucas learned to tend them, checking for pests, watering at dawn. By July, the plants were thriving. The cabin had become something more than shelter. It had become home. Patricia visited in August with Jake. He was tall, quiet, with his grandfather's careful way of looking at things. He walked the property like he was reacquainting himself with an old friend, touching trees he'd climbed, examining repairs I'd made. "You did good work," he said finally. "Grandpa would have liked you. I wish I'd met him." "You did, in a way. The journal, the cabin. That was him. Practical, generous, stubborn as hell." Jake handed me an envelope. This was in his things. He wrote it the week before he died, asked me to give it to whoever stayed. Inside, a short letter. "You made it. That means you understood what I was trying to do. This land isn't valuable because it's pretty or profitable. It's valuable because it's a place where someone can start over, where work matters more than credit scores, where what you build with your hands counts for something. I'm glad it's yours now. Take care of it. And when your boy's grown and you're my age, find someone who needs it and pass it forward. That's how we keep places like this alive. Samuel." I read it twice. Lucas read it over my shoulder. Neither of us spoke for a while. By fall, we'd harvested enough vegetables to can for winter. Helen taught us how. Boiling jars in the big kettle, sealing lids, organizing shelves in the root cellar. The work was meditative, rhythmic. It felt like preparing for the next chapter. Lucas started school in town that September. Real school with teachers and classmates. He'd grown taller, browner from sun, more confident. He told his class about the cabin, about Samuel, about how you could own something by taking care of it. His teacher called it the best presentation of the year. In October, I hosted a work party. 20 people showed up, neighbors, people from church we'd started attending, the construction crew. We weatherproofed the outhouse, built a proper woodshed and cleared trails through the forest. By evening, we had a fire going outside, soup in the kettle, people sharing stories. Helen's husband told me Samuel used to do this. Host gatherings. Invite anyone who needed a meal or a project. He believed in useful community, he said. Not just socializing, but building things together. You're carrying that on. I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. The cabin had become a hub, a place people came to when they needed help with a project, advice, or just a reminder that hard work could lead to something solid. In November, Dan Hutchins called, not to make another offer, but to apologize. I was wrong, he said. I saw property. You saw legacy. That land's worth more the way you're using it than it ever would have been as rentals. He paused. If you ever need materials, tools, whatever, call me. I owe you that. I thanked him, surprised. People could change when they watched someone refuse to quit. Winter came again. Our second winter in the cabin. This time, we were ready. Firewood stacked, food stored, roof solid, loft secure. Lucas and I spent evenings reading by lamplight, working through Samuel's journals again, finding details we'd missed the first time. One entry stood out, dated December 2015. Legacy isn't what you leave. It's what people do with what you've left. I've built this place as solid as I can, but it'll only matter if someone chooses to keep it going. That's the test. Not just survival, but commitment. Not just staying, but believing it's worth staying for. I understood now. The cabin wasn't the legacy. The choice was. On Christmas Eve, Patricia and Jake returned with gifts. Solar panels for the cabin, a satellite internet setup so Lucas could do schoolwork easier, and a framed photo of Samuel standing on the porch, smiling, the forest bright behind him. Merry Christmas, Patricia said. From Dad. We mounted the photo above the fireplace. That night, with the fire crackling and snow falling outside, Lucas asked what I thought Samuel would say if he could see us now.